Hi guys, my name's David and welcome to Learn That Photo. Today we are going to have a look at actions and batch editing, hopefully two things that can make your life a little bit easier. So what are actions? It's basically coding for Photoshop is the easiest way to think of this. You record a bunch of instructions for Photoshop, and the next time you want Photoshop to do those things, you hit play and it does all those things instead of you having to do them. So it can save a lot of time. So if you have color grading, you could save that, or image resizing, or maybe just adding a watermark. Anything like that. It could be a specific type of black and white adjustment, or a way that you particularly like to sharpen your photos. Whatever it is that you apply to lots of images rather than just to one, you could save that as an action. Now this doesn't work for things like, say, removing a spot from a specific point on a person, because that point that the spot's at will move around the image. If you record an action, it's going to look for it in the same space every time. So just be wary of that. It's things that will be the same in every image, the same edits every time. But that's basically what an action is. It's just making our life easier by speeding up the editing process. And batch editing is a way of doing that even more. So you can apply an action rather than just to the image that's open, to an entire folder. So you could apply this to 10 images, 20 images, 50 images, whatever you want, and Photoshop will open up, apply that action, and save if you want it to, and then close every one of those images. So you could have a folder of 300 images that maybe need resized, and you could just say, this folder, this action, go, and come back with a coffee and your images are resized, or have a watermark added, or have a new filter added, or whatever it may be, all without you having to do anything more than a few clicks of Photoshop. So let's get stuck in and see how these work anyway. So before we start here, I have two folders on my desktop. Let's just delete this here and make batch 2 a completely empty folder. And in batch 1, I have our 3 images that we're going to do this with. So let's take the image, load it straight into Photoshop, and they're all these kind of slightly washed out, slightly low-key sort of images, and they were for a sort of cinematic shoot. The end results I can throw up later on a different tutorial, but all 3 basically have the same kind of values and tones, so the same effect should work quite well across all 3. So let's create our action. Now, if you don't know where the actions are, they'll be in this little triangle box here, this actions button. If you don't have that there, just go Window, Actions, and they'll come right up. And all we have just now, you can see, is the default Photoshop actions, which actually, some of them may be useful. Most of them I haven't really used more than once to see what it does, and that's about it. But they can be quite good to explore just to see how actions work. And each one will have the list of things that, or the list of instructions that Photoshop's been told to do. So let's make a new folder, this little folder button, and we'll just call it My Actions. And then let's click this button here for a new action. We'll create a brand new action. We'll just leave it as action 1, that'll do. So we've got our action, and you'll notice this button is now red, which means it's recording everything we do. Everything we do during this recording process will be noted down by Photoshop and will be applied every time the action is run. So it's important that we really keep that in mind. So let's just go for some color grading, keep things nice and simple. We'll go Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Curves, OK. And let's maybe add some blue and purple into the lower tones and a little bit of yellow into the highlights, in keeping with the sort of cinematic look. So blue, let's bring up the blues and the shadows, crunch it down in the mids, and then level it off and bring the yellows down. Yeah, a little bit there. And I say bring the yellows down, bring the blues down to add in yellow would be a bit more accurate. So anywhere that you take out blue, you're going to add yellow. So blue if we add, yellow if we take away. There we go. So we've got blues added into the shadows and some yellow added into the highlights. It's important to kind of note or learn the opposite values for these so that you know exactly what you're doing. But for now, put the blue in there, and let's go into the green, because we want to add over magenta, so we will keep that there and just bring this down in the shadows. So just dropping some green out of the shadows, which will effectively add magenta. There we go. I don't want to go too heavy on the purple, it's more of a blue tone that I'm aiming for. There we go, right there. So that gives us our colour grading. Let's also just do a little second layer so you can see how this would work. And bring this up, there we go. And what I'll also do, just so you can see how this records, I will hide this and then show it. So I'm effectively undoing that process, but both will still be in here because it's recording every click. So now we'll hit close. We've got all the adjustments we've just made there. We've made a curves layer, we've set it, we've made a brightness layer, we've set it. We hid one of the layers and then we put it to show again. Now all we need to do is go File, Save, and tell it to go to Batch 2, our empty folder at the moment. We'll change this to JPEG, save, and we'll tell it to keep the quality right up at 12. There we go. Once we're happy with all of the orders, commands, points within this action, just hit stop. There we go. And we could go back into this, hit record, and continue on if we wanted to as well. So you're not always fully done when you hit stop there. You can go back in and make adjustments. But there we have it. And if we didn't want this show hide layer here or anything else that we maybe accidentally add in, you can just click on them, drag them over here, and bin them. So you can go in and edit these actions afterwards, but it's not as easy as just getting it right the first time. So there we go, we've made our action. And now, if we wanted to load in another photo, we'll just drag this up here on the bar and it will open up too. We could go, oh, I quite like that image. Let's add that cool colour grading thing we did the other week. Like that, hit play, and it's applied. You could go in and just adjust it to tastes, but if you have things set the way that you like them, you won't even need to adjust anything after either word. So that would be making an action and applying it to individual images. Let's speed up this process even more. So let's close these. I won't bother saving anything because I'm going to tell it to automatically apply that action to all three of those images. So let's close this as well. And we'll just close off everything in batch 2. Delete it, I should say. And now let's batch edit. So let's go File, Automate, and from there, Batch. Now in here, select the action folder that you want and then the individual action that you want. So we had my actions, action 1. And then it's saying source. So this is where do you want the action to be applied to? Where are the source files for this? And it might be in the open files that you already have. So if you have 7 files open in Photoshop, you can actually just batch on all of the individual ones that are open. Could be files in Bridge, could be imported files. In this case, it's a folder of images, and I always find that the easiest way. I'll just throw the 25 or 50 images into a folder, batch the lot of them. So folder, and we'll choose the folder, and it was on the desktop, so let's go desktop, and it was batch 1, or just batch was the folder. That's where we had the originals, these ones, and then destination folder. And I always think save it to a different destination. If something goes wrong with 50 images, it might be a long time. Even if you have the raw files and you can go back, it might be a long process getting back to having that initial folder of images ready to batch edit. So I always think save these to a second folder. Worst case scenario, if something goes wrong, if you miss a step in the action or anything, just if anything goes wrong, you still have that first folder of images to go back to and try again. So let's choose batch 2, our currently empty folder, as the save point. Batch 2. So it will open from batch 1, it will apply the action, and it will save to batch 2. And then let's go. Okay, I don't need to change any of these. This is the normal kind of naming format. I've told it to overwrite action save as commands. If I take that off, then it would ask us every time as we go through for the prompts. It'll ping up a box and say, what do you want to call this file? And it's not really batch editing because you're still sitting there hitting the OK button when you save every time. So overwrite those because we have a save as command in the action. That's why we put that in there. So okay, we've got that ticked, and then we just hit go. And I've also got stop for errors. You can tell it just log the errors and let me know later, but no, if there's errors, stop, because why apply errors to 50 or 100 or 200 photos? So stop for errors. And we'll just hit OK. There's number 1, there's number 2, there's number 3, done. Much quicker than if we'd done that separately for all 3 files. Let's go and have a look. And in batch 2, sure enough, we have our edited files. Maybe a bit too much purple in there, but we have our edited files. That's how I didn't realise it'd be quite so much purple in there. And we could just, for comparison's sake, let's open up the edited file and the one it took it from, so you can see it really has applied that action there to the file. Everything else is the same, but the action's applied. So that's a really quick way of just applying the same thing to multiple files automatically. Basically programming for Photoshop. And when you start getting into this, you can find suppliers online. I would do this with your own actions first. Get used to the process of using actions with just ones that you're writing. There are places that also sell actions that will do specific things that are maybe a bit more complicated, but unless you're using those actions and you're going in and maybe looking at the actual action. For example, if you say you bought an action, you could then go in and you could look at every single step that that person's done to get to a specific point, and then by buying that action you might be able to actually use it as a learning process to learn all those steps. But it's a complicated way to learn. So if we're beginning, I would just stick to our own actions and just use this as a time-saving exercise at the moment. But you can buy actions online that will then do other things as well, and some of them might do things that would naturally take about 2 or 3 hours in Photoshop to do by hand, and it'll go in and just tear through it in 5 or 10 minutes. I think the longest action I've written took the PC a good 10 minutes to run through, but it took a few hours to write. So if I was wanting to do that to 5 photos, I'm saving myself a day of time. Saving a lot of time by doing that. So I would record it the first time and then just apply it every time over and over. So there we go. Hopefully you can now write actions, play actions on your individual photos, and batch edit across a whole group or a whole folder of images as well. If you have enjoyed this, then please give a like, give a share, hit subscribe, or even just leave a comment down below. And again, thank you so much for listening along.